is called back to order. Council members will please reassemble.
Been there before for me. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
No problem. Okay. Next on our agenda is continuing consideration of the 2014 to 2015 biennial operating budget, which is listed as item C in your agenda. I would ask the clerk to please read the item into the record.
Resolution number 2013-0229, a resolution adopting the 2014-2015 biennial operating budget and capital improvements program and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Thank you very much. We have now completed the process of hearing from all the departments and agencies, and we're into the process of trying to sort it out and decide what amendments and changes we're going to make. And there's two things that I would like to try to accomplish at today's meeting. And the first one would be the adoption of an initial amendment, and the second is that we're going to go around the table and hear everybody's thoughts and suggestions about the budget, with the hopes of by the end of the day having all of the issues and suggestions out on the table so that we have a sense of what the universe of suggestions and concerns is that we're working with. So we'll start with the amendment, and it says on the top of the one-page sheet, in large print, it says Amendment to Resolution 2013-0229. It's this item here, and what this amendment does is simply three things. The first is that it approves the OBM technical amendments that they submitted to us and revised on November 15th, and those technical amendments are attached. And if anyone, they're minor and corrective in nature, and a lot of them simply involve realigning funds within line items without affecting the total amount. The second thing that this amendment does is that it approves all of the restorations from for the Health and Human Services budget. It does not include any of the program suggestions for new programs or new spendings. It's simply the restorations and the items in the OSU extension and the juvenile court where they were not cut but just the funding source was changed. We left those as they were, so those are not included in this amendment. The third thing that the amendment does is simply adds a section incorporating into this resolution our support for the two homeless items, the Metanoia project and the annual Stand Down conference, which we have been funding and hope to continue to fund. And we received testimony that there is sufficient funding in the current budget proposal for that purpose, but we just want to put forward our support for it. The purpose of adopting this amendment at this time is to allow us to get a better baseline to work on in making the final decisions. With the passage of this amendment, OBM is then willing to prepare a new resolution and prepare new roll-ups, which will enable us to know exactly where we are spending-wise going into the consideration for new requests. So, I would also bring to everybody's attention that there is a typographical error. If you go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, for the line that says Family and Children First Council, and it says $784,004 in the first column, well, that should read $784,004 in both columns. The higher number that's there is a 2016 number that's not relevant to this discussion. So if you would please change that on your amendment sheet. What? Yes, I'm sure that it would change the total, so we'll have to correct that.
Mr. Chair, the reason I ask because the number that's footed on this schedule has that 2 million number as a 2015 number.
Director Rubino? Can you tell us immediately if the 10,472,000 total restoration number on the bottom has to be amended?
On what document?
Well, here.
It's on the list of restorations. We made this correction.
It's correct on the document we provided. So the document that we provided, the long sheet that had all the restorations, the numbers are correct in both the 14 of, yes, not that one, but the long sheet that we emailed to you is correct.
We'll stand in recess for just a moment, and we're just going to add it up.
That's not ours.
It should be $8,869,059.
If you if you change it different from this, that's correct. This report, the 10 million is the right number. With the 2.3 million, then it's 10 million.
Right.
If it's 784, it's 8 million.
8.8 mil.
Right.
$8,869,059.
Right.
Just roughly 8.8. Slush mine.
What is that, Gene?
Mr. Chairman, the official number is $8,869,059.
Okay. So, so with that, with those corrections, I would move that this amendment be incorporated into the budget resolution.
Mr.
It has
Chairman,
been moved and seconded. Councilman Brady.
thank you. I have no objections to this amendment. I do want to point out the obvious. This is of course, the most important reason that we decided to go to the ballot in the first place, in order to be able to do what we're about to do. But we are also, I'm also mindful of the fact that we are really taking a sort of a simplistic approach to these appropriations by simply restoring every single cut as if there are no cuts that are valid. And so we are spending money that we will not have to that we will not be able to take into consideration after this point, if we are going to assume that every single thing that the county does, that there is absolutely no room for adjustment. So I know that I don't want to make this process more complicated, and so that's why I'm willing to support this amendment. But I just want to state that fact that we are taking the easiest possible way out of this by not literally going over these budget items and trying to determine whether there are areas where we might be able to make some reductions.
I think that point is very well made, except that I would point out that this amendment only provides us a baseline to work further on, so that we kind of know where we are, and the quick initial signal from the administration was that they felt that the things that were cut only because of the lack of resources that would have resulted if the levy had not passed, and that they felt that these things were needed. But if on a careful review going through these items, we find a few items that are of a lower priority than something else that we have in mind, this in no way precludes further amendment. It in no way says that these restorations have to end up exactly in this form in the final version of the resolution.
Mr. Chairman, I'm satisfied with your response that the nuance that allows the flexibility going forward. I just want to also remind the council again, and I have no objection, but just to have some clarity here, because it's a fast-moving thing we've got here, is that this proposal, and understandably because the levy was just passed, this proposal was given to us last, what day?
Thursday.
Last Thursday. Mm-hmm. And so on Tuesday, we're agreeing to a proposal by the administration that spends down, vast sums of money. So that's not the council's initiative, although it certainly was. The council showed its intent by putting the levy on the ballot in the first place. So I'm satisfied. I just want to air this out a little bit.
Okay. Any further discussion on this? Okay. Ms. Conwell.
Through the chair, to I guess Mr. Rubino, the numbers for the Family and Children First Council on this recommended on this amendment is still different than the budget book, and I brought it up before with Director Martin, and she said she was going to email me the correct amounts that should be in that section, and I checked my email and I don't see it. But they greatly differ. For example, in your budget book at section 329, it originally stated that the workforce development, we give 200,000 to that. That's drastically been reduced to 100K. And then the sexual awareness from the Board of Health actually went up some dollars. In the original budget book, it was 373, but it's on our amendment as 432. And then the Youth Advisory Committee has been slashed $5,000, whereas the budget book, it was still the same. And the evaluation was moved up from 50,000 to 100,000. I did have a brief conversation with Director Martin, and the only change from her outlook of the figures when I talked to her when she was here was the evaluation should have been increased to 50,000, and she explained why, because of the Case Western Reserve and their component and how they work with that. But she said she would check with the other figures and get back to me, and she hasn't. So
I'll offer
I want
this.
to know why those has changed.
We'll have to
or
contact
different.
Director Martin. The total true reduction was 784. She may be wanting to allocate that 784 differently amongst those different programs, but they're all in the same budget line. They're all in the contracts line of her budget.
You're going to make me add now.
So what we can do is follow up with her and get back to you tomorrow and see if she has a final answer on how she would like to allocate those restorations amongst those programs and make sure we're all on the same page. But when we published the book, that was information we had. Now we do have a little bit of an entrepreneurial component with that contract line. In any given year, take FCFC, they may choose to reallocate or devote additional dollars in one area and a little less in others, depending on utilization or other things. So we'll follow up, we'll find out, but in the end, it will match that restoration, that 784, between those individual program
So you're
lines.
saying all the things in this section equals 784?
In this section, remember the 380 was not a reduction, that was an actual correction to the 2013 appropriation line. It should be in general fund, not in the levy. So exclude that one because that's not
Yeah.
And if you add them up, it should be that 784.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Jones.
Okay. In the proposed cuts from the administration, were those dollars towards layoffs? Would there be any layoffs as a result of those cuts?
To the councilman through the chair, the administration proposed changes in our personnel and fringe benefit budget levels. The anticipation is that we would do freezes for certain administrative positions. Please understand that certain administrative position means almost all administrative positions. Our goal was not to have those freezes impact direct service workers. So folks like the social service worker threes, the eligibility specialists, there were others as well. But the goal was to hold on hiring to replace folks that left on attrition.
Okay.
Councilman Rogers.
Thank you. And we may have had this, but I'm just looking in my our stack of papers we've received. Do we have any kind of cheat sheet that would show
That's the same.
how much, how much is the total request? How much is the total reserve? How much with new request is left over? I'm trying to get a handle on how much, it's good. Like, how much money are we talking about? And how much is left? And what's the real dollar amount that we have to really consider? From what I'm looking at with some of the recommendations that have come in from some of the colleagues, I'm just wondering if there is actually enough money there to do what some of these requests are.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman Brady.
I'm just responding to Councilman Rogers. I didn't intend to say anything about this until, miscellaneous, I guess, or when we went around as you were talking about, but because you've raised the issue, and that's a little bit of what I was getting at myself. On tomorrow at my Health and Human Services Committee, where we had initially planned to and still will talk about food stamps and have people in to talk about that and what we might be able to do about it. It occurred to me as this process was kind of moving quickly, and once I saw the new proposal from the administration, that kind of an issue would come up pretty quickly. And so what I'm also going to do is have the administration come over and talk about not only what we have above the Health and Human Service limit, above our reserve limit, what we have there, and what we also have in the other account, the public assistance account, which amounts to, I think, about $32 million. We know a little bit. We know that when the proposal that came over from the administration last Thursday, in fact, indicated their proposal dipped into the public assistance fund. And so I think those are pertinent questions, and that's one of the reasons that I want to explore in the meeting tomorrow what those funds are, particularly the assistance fund, what its history is. How do we get to the point where we've got $32 million in it? Was that really ever the intention? What's it for? And since the administration has already proposed spending down on it, then what level of spending down on it would be considered appropriate? And if there's some level that is not appropriate, what is that? It's sort of almost for a lot of people, almost a mystery fund at this point, set up, I think, about a decade ago or so to react to a problem. And I wanted to know now, 10 years later, what does that mean? So I think partly in the answer to your question is that there are other funds out there, and of course, how to prudently spend them is the most important issue if we choose to. And I guess the answer is yes. There is money for other items if we choose to spend down on it. And we also have, if we chose to spend down on it or dip into it, would probably be a less scary way of talking about it, quite a bit of money above our 25% reserve in the general fund. So, we should just have a clear view of how much money there is available. Whether we decide to spend it or not is, of course, up to the council and what we deem to be responsible. And that's a debate. But what I would suggest is we not try to narrow this debate into believing we have only a few $1 million to work with, when frankly we have quite a bit more than that to work with.
I was happy to see Councilman Brady's addition to the schedule tomorrow for Health and Human Services, and I think that will be very useful. To give you a few benchmarks for starters in the meantime, the general fund budget is balanced on an operating balance with only $500,000 to spare. And so if we decide that we want a balanced budget, we don't have a whole lot to play with, but there is also the question of to what extent we might want to use any of the general fund reserves. In the Health and Human Services area, we entered into the levy campaign with a operating shortfall of about $24 million annually, and the levy produces 26 to 27 million additional dollars annually. So that would suggest that that on a balanced basis that we could restore what had been cut and add $2 to $3 million annually, and and be balanced in terms of revenues and expenses. But then there is also the question of we do have some reserve in excess of the 10% guideline, plus we have considerable dollars, as Councilman Brady pointed out, in the PA funds, and we might prudently use at least some of those items, particularly for expenditures that are more one-time in nature and don't create ongoing obligations. So those are some of the considerations. And Ms. Simon, did you want to?
Point. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The math that I have indicates that we would have a revenue stream in excess of the cuts we did of about $5.5 million coming in on the Health and Human Service levy, and you said 2 to 3. So maybe we need to really nail that down, because I had a little bit more than what you just indicated after restoring cuts and what we anticipated to go into the reserve to fund some programs. So I just want to make sure we know what we're talking about, because I have different numbers and you're the guru, but I just want to reconcile these.
Well, you know, this is particularly what I think this amendment will help with, because it'll get us a lot closer to where we're going to end up, and it'll kind of give us a baseline, because when they do a new roll-up following this amendment, well, we'll see more accurately exactly where we are.
And just one more thing. In terms of these restoration of services and/or personnel, whatever we're looking at with regard to this amendment, I'm assuming that all of these programs have already been fielded in committee and that this council approved these programs. I'm just addressing Councilman Brady's point. Do we look at these again? I think we've looked at these already pretty much in detail. So
these are all existing ongoing programs that we've been running for some
through committees and HHS and such. So I don't mind looking at it again, but if there's anything that we haven't really scrutinized, then that needs to come out now so we can revisit it. But if it's everything we've already looked at or...
Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Jones and then Brady.
Thank you.
Just to comment on the restoring of the cuts. When I first heard about the cuts through committee, I was actively knocking on doors, speaking to people, speaking in committee, in meetings to fight for the Health and Human Service levy dollars. And my first visceral response was, you haven't considered the fact that the HHS levy will provide money to keep these dollars in place. So that was my first initial response. But now I'm thinking, and I asked Director Merriman a question about their staffing levels. The administration has set their levels, and as you mentioned, the caseworkers and the social workers, staffing levels that I personally, and I believe many of our colleagues have been on council, have been concerned about. But the administration has set their levels. And I'm concerned now and of the mind that if the administration has set their levels now with their budget cuts, if we add additional or restore the cuts, is the administration of the mindset to even raise the staffing levels if we simply restore the cuts? So I think we actually have flexibility in the room to say the administration has actually drawn up what they want to do in regards to staffing levels. And if we simply restore the cuts, will those dollars even be used to raise staffing levels in those particular areas? The administration may have already told us what they intend to do with staffing levels and the freezing of them at this certain level. And if that's the case, we should consider how these dollars can be used in a way in partnership with the administration where they might use them in ways that we all might see as productive. So I think it's worth a conversation to go back into the restoring, into the idea of even considering restoring these additional dollars.
Just responding to Councilwoman Simon, I agree with what you said. I was trying to just set a context a context about how much money this is and how we're going about it, not as if it's unfamiliar and we've never seen it before. Now, we did see quite a few programs that were unfamiliar and we hadn't seen before the other day, for sure. But yes, this is quite familiar. And I'm satisfied with the chairman's response that in spite of this amendment, there is flexibility. And I share some of the concerns that Councilman Jones brought up about whether even with the restoration of the cuts, we will be adequately staffed. But that's probably an ongoing, issue and discussion that's going to be take place month after month after month. And we've had testimony from the directors, and if anyone has a need that they're not expressing, I hope they draw it to our attention.
Councilman Greenspan.
Great. Let me just kind of make a general statement, and Mr. Brady hit it on the head. And I believe tomorrow we're going to have an outline of the PA fund, correct, in the committee. We are, as this budget represents, revenues do match expenses. However, keep in mind on the HHS side that included in the HHS number is a utilization of the PA fund. That money is diminishing as we use that and draw that fund down. So keep in mind, and we probably need to look strategically in the out years when that fund is either no longer available or significantly reduced, how it's used to offset some expenses. So we may need to consider maybe not spending everything that came in so that we can provide a consistent delivery of services in some of the out years. Because if we don't, let's say in 2016, 2017, and the PA fund is reduced significantly, then we will not have that ability to provide a balanced HHS budget, because those numbers that we're using to balance it will not be available. So I just want to make that general statement. I'm glad we're going to be discussing it in detail tomorrow in committee, because it's a concern we need to address.
Mr. Chair? Yeah, just a comment on that. I don't disagree with that, but there's a couple things here that are, one-time only need, and I think that's what you're referencing to, is to see how if we're going to spend part of this PA, which I'm in favor of, by the way, how are we going to do that? And the crisis now with the TANF program, that is not going to, I hope, not an ongoing need. So I agree that we need to see how it's going to be used if we're going to use it, and I'm in favor of using it.
Okay. Any further discussion on the amendment? Ms. Conwell.
Just, correction with this, adding up the figures for the Family First Council. In the book, in the original budget, it was 748,004, which is an inverting of the numbers that they put in the column, and then adding up the new ones on the amendment just comes out to 752,000. So incorrect.
Director? In the Family and Children First Council.
Yes.
We have restore funding to youth employment, 100,000, sex awareness, 432, youth advisory, 120, evaluation, 120, or 100. And it comes out to 752. But the total number that's listed was 784,004. Can you help us on what accounts for that difference?
Not right now. What I'll do is we'll touch base with Director Martin, find out what that total should be, and make sure you have the correct information.
What I think happened in the budget, in their initial budget that they did, the numbers were the same, 748,004. I just think they inverted the 4 and the 8. But as we're moving forward with the amendment, we need to cross that first column out and second column out and look at, it's only 752,000 versus 784.
Okay, well, you're going to need to confirm this and get back to us, and
Yes.
if we need to make a technical correction, we'll make one.
Okay.
For now we're gonna use the number that's for now, we're going to use the number that's in the budget book, which is 784,000. What? The budget book is at what number?
Budget book, at the old figures, it was 748,004. So I'm just looking at that, maybe the numbers were carried over, inverted a little bit, and adding up just, and I know you stated earlier that these, you don't have necessarily the total figures. So these come up that are presented before us as 752, but even if it was a major difference from the 784, that's only 32,000. So still doesn't add up.
I think it's going to be
somewhere.
closer to this 748. That's what we'll double check.
What is that?
I think it'll be closer to that 748 figure, the total restoration.
Yeah.
We'll make sure.
Well, we'll use 748,000 then. Okay, 748. And that, and what? 748,004. And I suggest that we just delete the totals from the, we don't need the totals. The director will just work these changes into the resolution. So we'll just cross those out rather than worrying about a wrong number on that. Does that work?
That works for me. I wanted to add some other information. We were talking about being able to have a baseline of where we're at now. Now that levy's passed, we have this request to make restorations, talking about what capacity do we have. What we'll do is we'll take the table on page Roman numeral 1-18 of the budget book. And that's the combined levy fund PA table based on the recommended budget. We'll give you the before, which is what you have right now in the book. And then we'll, in a sense, reset that to where we're at right now. So we know we have additional about 27 million in revenue. We'll add the restorations and the impact for the levy utilization. And then we're going to zero out the levy reserve and the PA resources utilization in that table to give you a baseline of where you're at. So you can see the balance in both the levy fund, where it's at percentage-wise, but also that balance in the PA fund, which is we're going to add at 33 million this year, thereabouts. So then you get an idea between those three things, the revenue in the levy, which is additional capacity, the reserve level in the levy fund itself, you'll be well above the 10% limit. And then we also have dollars in the PA fund balance. So you can see those three things. If you remember when we talked about how did we present a balanced levy fund budget, it was a combination of three things. It was reductions to program budgets. It was use of levy reserve. It was also use of PA fund resources. We put those three things together. And I'll come armed with some slides. I can pull some slides from what we talked about when we presented the budget and then give you some of this, some updates using that table format since we're accustomed to that table format in the book.
Mr. Chairman.
That's exactly the kind of update that I was looking for.
Right.
Councilman Rogers and then Jones.
Thank you. I would appreciate that. And this particular chart doesn't show the general fund balance.
That one does not know, but we can also provide.
But if you can, include that in there as well,
Sure.
that'd be great.
Councilman Jones.
And my question is to Director Merriman. Tell me, Director, are your staffing levels as a result of the budget cuts, are your staffing levels where you want them to be, or do you desire to raise staffing levels across the HHS spectrum or anywhere in particular?
Through the councilman, through the chair, the staffing levels that are being proposed in this amendment restore us to the staffing levels that departments have utilized for the past 2 years. And departments are continuously looking at their staffing. I think Director Rideout reported on an assessment she's doing where she's going to be looking at administrative staff, determining if they have the right number, they're in the right place, they're doing the right sorts of work. So staffing levels are subject to review on an ongoing basis. But what we've presented to you are the staffing levels that we've been working with for the past 2 years. And it's our hope that we'll restore our budget to be able to continue that work.
So just for clarity, my original question was, will staffing levels drop as a result of the cuts? And I thought the answer was no, there might be benefits, but not actual drop in staffing levels.
To the councilman through the chair, if the proposed reductions were to continue, there would not be, it's our hope we wouldn't do layoffs, but the intention would be to not hire staff when attrition occurs, so to freeze positions. So over time, there would be a reduction in the amount of staff that are in the departments.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. We have a motion and a second to adopt the amendment. It's with the, we should have a motion on changing that column from 784 to 748,004 in both columns under Family and Children First Council. Is there a second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Okay, so that's included. And now on the motion itself, the three parts, the technical amendments, the restorations, and the two homeless programs. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Motion's approved. Okay, so that's the first step. The next thing that we want to do is to go around the table and to give everybody a chance to give their thoughts about the budget and their recommendations for changes. And to start, I would ask if there's anybody here that's on a short time frame and is going to have to leave shortly. We would let them go first. Okay. Then within the next half hour.
No.
Okay.
The next day, yes.
Okay. Then we're going to start. We're going to start with the two that submitted written items, because I'm sure they're well prepared, which is Council President Conley and Ms. Conwell, and then we'll go down the line, starting with the Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've heard some very poignant statements today from, I believe it was 7 people, who told the stories about their need and the growing need in this county for Health and Human Service dollars. And all of us, most of us on this council, went out and we worked for this levy, and we asked the voters to vote for it on the basis that we were going to provide assistance, particularly in mental health and for mental health issues. And when I called my friends particularly, and they said, oh, we really know that we need this money. And so we've got to fulfill our promise to the voters to do what we promised to do with the funds that we raised on this levy. So to that end, I've proposed some changes, some amendments to the budget. And I'd just like also to point out that this whole budget process is a collaborative effort. This is not Ellen Conley's budget or Dale Miller's budget. This is all of our work together. So it's important that we talk with each other and share our ideas. So I've given all of you some proposed items that they speak for themselves. One of them is there's additional money for the homeless services, for additional food assistance. This is one that's particularly important because this would provide food assistance throughout the county, not just in the city of Cleveland, for senior and adult services, for additional hot meals, for a program for this Division of Community Initiative, which is we working with children in the schools. And one of the things also I proposed is under the wellness fund is $275 that would increase the subsidy for employees to encourage them to take public transportation. When we move to the new building, parking may not be the same, probably will not be the same as it is now. And we know that people who take public transportation actually encourages a healthier lifestyle. I've always had this idea that every public official should be required to take public transportation every year or so, because it really gives you other side of life when you take public transportation. But this would be the subsidy to employees would be comparable to the subsidy we give employees for parking, and would also be good for the ecology because we save all that gas and not have that many automobiles in the central city. We have money for the Consumer Affairs, for the Common Police Court, for Domestic Relations Court. Some of these are items that Mr. Miller had included in his budget items. But I think that these are some good proposals. I've talked individually to other members of council about them, and I think that this would be these would be very important amendments to the budget that would fulfill our promise to the voters and also complete some of the tasks that we have started here on council.
Great, thank you very much. We're going to go to Ms. Conwell, and then we're going to go to Ms. Simon and work our way down the row. Ms. Conwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think mine is broken out as far as my feelings as far as the Adams Board and the different services. I am pro mental health, fighting for monies for them. Now, I am very compromisable on the money amount, so you can take a look at, I think Mr. Dinahan gave us a great breakdown of where the needs of the services for the agencies that he needed in what areas, and he was very specific. Also about, I'm very pro-prevention, but I know you can't always put all your dollars in prevention. We have to take care of the issues, the treatment and criminal justice, as well as the crisis and clinical. So you can take a look at those. I won't go through those individually. I do have for the Senior and Adult Services, DSAS, and I put / Board of Health. I'm not meaning 25,000 K to go to each, but to one of those organizations. It probably would be more for DSAS, just for them to have a coordination of the bed bug assistance for 65 years and older. There's no assistance out there, whether it's City of Cleveland, Parma, or the county, as far as helping indigent seniors that are still trying to maintain and live in their homes without going to a nursing home and costing us more money when they get bed bugs. So I would like us all to really take a look at that. So the 25K is just for one of the organizations, not for both. And I believe I thought I had put a year on that. I thought I had meant for it to be just for 2014 to see how it works. We know we advertise everything with the county on the website. Everybody's not going to read the website, so everybody's not going to use up 25,000 real quick. But we'll know when they are calling in, or family members calling in to DSAS to reach out to see if there's some sort of assistance that they would know it was there for them to be able to get. The Office of the Metanoia Project, I agree with Councilman Miller. I just think in light of the situation we are with the SNAP, there's going to be more able-bodied people that are probably going to go to that program. So I thought maybe an additional 5,000 for them this year would be considered. As far as the Office of the Director, no increases, but bringing back to my point, central intake consolidation of DSAS, EFS, and DCFS. If we can really get that started in January 1, 2014, as well as Councilman Schrein, we believe that that's going to increase a lot of savings. And then those dollars that are saved could also maybe help with some of the staffing levels that we would like to accommodate. homeless services, I know everything was restored, but I do agree, and I think I asked Director Gillette how she felt in keeping the permanent housing from transitional to permanent housing, and she felt it was the best interest to move toward permanent housing. So I'm in support of that in 2015, moving forward to continue to vacate North Point from traditional housing to permanent housing. Metro Hospital, I believe that their request should be greatly considered by this body. I am in favor of $2 million from the general fund. I do agree with Councilwoman Simon that that we need a breakdown of more of what those dollars will be for, but I would be willing to compromise on that amount. I just put a placeholder, but I do feel that they should be looked at. And the reason I picked general fund is due to the fact that there is a county council and an administrative, this is our public hospital, not one separate body or entity, so we should all look into putting money in that fund. The Hunger Network and Cleveland Food Bank, I think that I'll learn a lot more compromisable on this fund as well. I'll learn a lot more tomorrow in Health and Human Services. Me and Joanne talked about the $800,000 figure, so I'm a better, more understanding of that tomorrow. As far as the administrative new programs in the HHS funding, we were here for all last year. I think we had committees and haven't heard about any of these programs until now, so not in favor of those until they go through committee and brought forth to see what the purpose and how that will span out. As far as I think Councilman Schrein brought up the new programs, which was a technical issue as far as the IT. It's really not new programs, so I'm in favor of the IT programs that are stated as new programs, but they're not. They should be existing programs and software from the PA fund. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Simon. We're going to go right down, what?
Okay. Oh, I see. So you,
Go from Ms. Simon right down.
okay. Thank you. My observation from these recommendations from my colleagues makes sense. We just have to put them together. But what I see missing on both of these would be a couple of the justice issues. One is the juvenile court request for additional detention funding. I want to just refresh everybody's memory that there's a Senate bill that passed, and it's Senate Bill 337, which set forth mandates to the juvenile justice system and was unfunded, which is no surprise, what we've seen a lot from the state. And one of them is to hold juveniles who are going to be bound over to the general division inside of the juvenile detention center. In the past, that mandate wasn't there. There's no funds to support that. And we heard from the court that we have a reduction in the security because of this. There's an overcapacity in our detention center. Now, I think it's 102, which is the norm, and now they're up to 170 at any given time because of these juveniles now who will be bound over. And new requirements for residential treatment. There's a paradigm shift, which I support, get the youth out of the detention center, ODYS, and put them out into community, which we've done a good job with that. But we need to maintain the residential services, but provide for this detention funding. It's crucial. We're going to see a problem down the road if we don't support that. The request was $587,000 to do this. I'm going to I'll put this in writing, that we support that request. And in terms of the public defender, there was one request that I think I would ask the council to support as an administrator for $90,000. Over at the Public Defender's Office. It's really important that that level is funded to allow that office to run smoothly, especially in light of the prosecutor's budget, which is adding additional staff of 17, I think, that were put in place before this budget. They're already employed there. So I think we want to make sure that both of these offices are commensurate in what they're given and how they operate. The prosecutors always have an advantage. That's just how our system is. So I want to make sure that that advantage is, the disparity isn't this versus this. So I'd like to see an administrator over at the public defender. And these 17 additional employees, which I heard are not additional, but have been there, I just want to see when those individuals were hired. And I don't mind this, pardon me?
To my knowledge, they're not additional. There were 17 people that were on unpaid leave, and now the money was taken out of the budget. So now the people just want to come back, and
All unpaid, that was my question.
yeah, they were
I
all
wasn't sure,
unpaid.
17 unpaid leave? Okay.
Unpaid leave.
Okay.
And so I guess whoever just looked and said, okay, well, they're gone, but they were on unpaid leave.
Some of them were, but I didn't
Yeah.
know all of them were.
Yeah, all of them were.
Okay, that's fine.
All right.
So those are just my observations. That's fine then. I think I would be looking at those two changes. I'll put those in writing to everybody.
And what about assigned counsel? Nothing on assigned counsel fees?
Support that. That's in here. I support what the council president set forth to fund the assigned council fees. That's paramount to the system of justice that we want to maintain. Absolutely, I support that. And I'm sorry I didn't speak to it, but that's here with our president's proposed budget amendment. Absolutely necessary to move forward with funding. That's not been changed since 1970, I think.
I would like people to mention things that they strongly support, even if they're on other people's lists, so that I can start to gauge the broadness of support for different kinds of items.
Okay, I support a subsidy increase to Metro Hospital. I'm not sure how much yet, but absolutely, I want to be able to provide additional funding for that. Senior and adult services, absolutely. Meals on Wheels is really vital. This food assistance, we're going to go through with the committee, but I think everything on this, I feel strongly there should be a subsidy to the Adams Board. I'm looking at my colleagues' specific budget requests. I'm not sure we want to get that specific in terms of how we're going to fund the Adams Board. There's some things I agree with, some things I don't, but probably the Adams Board needs additional funding. But for now, that would be the highlights from me.
Councilman Rogers.
Thank you. Just for clarity, I believe that when the prosecutor was here, that they said that there were 21 people that were on unpaid leave at some point, and then 17 of those 21 are actually back at work and aren't included in the budget. I believe that's what the numbers were. So 17 are actually back, but there were a total of 21. Sorry, memory. So I'm using our council president's list because it's pretty easy. I will supply my own list, but I do want to reiterate that I support an increase to the Metro Health. I believe $4 million would be along the lines of what I would support as well. An increase to the Adams Board, and still up in the air on what that number would be. A couple of things that I really did want to highlight, though, is there was a request from the administration for an increase of $1 million for the Universal Pre-K program, and from our committee hearings on the success of that program, we really haven't seen that large of a return on investment than you get with early education. So I would support the full $1 million request for an increase at Universal Pre-K. The Wellness Fund, the RTA subsidy, I fully support that. I think that the comments that were made by the president, I fully support. The new initiative, pilot program for closing the educational achievement gap. I think that this is a somewhat new venture for the county, but it falls in line with the idea that this new form of government can do more and be more creative. So I would support the establishment of that pilot program. And there was one other thing that I really wanted to, obviously the reserve on balance the 1 million per year in support of the scholarship programs that the council has initiated. I fully support that as well.
Okay. Thank you. Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I am working off, as my colleagues have said, the proposed budget amendment that our council president has put forward. I think she has captured the spirit of things that I support, and I support everything across this sheet. But I will speak to the things that I have particular interest in. One, the Metro Health Hospital. They were integral and a critical part of passing our Health and Human Services levy. They're from their life flight across the literature to just their full engagement in the entire process of this campaign levy. And their request for $4 million is something I support wholeheartedly. And we know the needs of this hospital in a coming new healthcare landscape in 2014. Other hospitals have made the capital improvements necessary to deal with this coming landscape, and I fully support Metro in these dollars going directly to the most vulnerable people in this community to, again, give them the ability to leverage dollars and use their other resources in ways that help this hospital. So I do support Metro Health for this $4 million per year for the next 2 years. The Adams Board as well. The Adams Board requests for $6 million per year for the next 2 years. I support this as well. When we go back to actual start of our levy, it started off with addressing the needs of the mental health community, and I believe supporting them to these dollars is important as well. So I support them for the full $12 million over 2 years. The HHS Division of Community Initiatives, the pilot program for closing the education achievement gap, I support this as well. It speaks particularly to issue in my own district. There are young people within the city of Cleveland, or particularly in the inner-ring suburbs, who need help in closing their achievement gap. There are many issues involved, the reasons why there is an educational gap for them that can relate to issues that we as a county and our social safety net address. So this is a pilot program that could really work across this county as a menu of services to any community that sees a need for this. And there are superintendents across this county who I believe are fully supportive of this, and we may hear from them more in the future. But this is definitely a program that I support. Again, this closing the achievement gap for, again, $250,000 per year for the next 2 years. The senior and adult services, the food provided through DSAS and also our HHS director, the additional food, those 2 items. I met with Director Gartner last Friday just to get more insight into the 29,000 people who could be removed from the food stamp rolls, and as their administration works to actually get a handle, that number of 29,000 may come down as they begin to assess the population and see who truly will or will not be on those rolls. So he has said they will have a better handle on what the actual number is by the beginning of December. So these dollars I certainly support and would be willing to adjust based on what the administration feels they need to deal with that situation. All of the other items on this list also I do support. I won't go any further into those, but I do support them in whole.
Councilman Schwan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I recall the presentation differently than others as far as how we went out to the levy campaign, and I recall it being one in which we were challenged by the property values having dropped significantly here in the community, and that because of that drop, that's why we asked for the additional amounts to make up that gap. And it was the budget presentation to us that there would be a reduction in order to make the budgets work in the absence of a passage of the levy. And so that's the numbers that which we were looking at. I support the chairman's position on restoring those, but it was my recollection of the way it came forward is that we were going to convince the public that we were in the gap because of the property values, and that this was the way in which we were going to try to restore those items that were going to have to be forced to be reduced should they not be supportive of the levy. So therefore, to then take those funds and then move into an additional $18 million of expenditure, I have some concerns about that. I will be studying that as we go forward, having just got this as far as what levels we want to, should we want to expand any. But I recall the presentations being differently. I did make presentations in my communities on the basis that the tax values on the property had as what precipitated the significant drop in our budgeting process. And as a result, that's the restoration we're talking about. And even within the restoration, we're talking about restoring programs without necessarily testing within those. We heard actually some presentations in here about whether or not staff levels would be appropriately to be restored by even some of the department heads that were in here, that they were not going to be doing that. And so as a result, I think just even to restoration does not necessarily mean you're restoring a program that should be completely restored, but I'm going to accept that at face value, that what it was what we should at least return that, because that's the commitment we made back to the voters in that respect. So I'm not prepared at this point to support a list of items out there in the $18 million category, but I will at least look at it from that standpoint.
Thank you very much. And I would start by saying that I see my role as the chairman of this committee as primarily one of managing a process in which there's emerging to be some divergence of views, not only within the council but also between the council and the administration. And my hope is to put together, with the help of all of you, a final product that fully reflects the desires and aspirations of the council collectively, and also reflects good collaboration with the administration. And the ideas that I present are as one of 11. And I start by saying I proposed less than some. I do think we should be cautious, and that we don't have to spend all the money that's available right away, and that we can work our way through this process. I'd like to bring a couple areas of particular interest of mine to mention. The first is the Human Resources Commission request for a consultant for $50,000 for a pay equity study. It's a small dollar amount item, but it also reflects a commitment to what's a very large process. And we inherited a true patchwork of different pay systems that we're only just beginning to address, and I think it's a very long-term process, probably long-term, to the extent that we'll have to almost completely cycle through a group of county employees to retirement before it's really fully addressed. But we should get started, so I support that item. And I do support getting our council-derived scholarship programs on a permanent funding footing and not just as a reserve on balance. And also the IT refresh, which Director Mowry tells us needs to be done every year on an ongoing basis. I think we should include that in the operating budget. And as far as the Health and Human Services, recognizing the great needs in the mental health area, I proposed an increase for the Adams Board though at a lower number than seen elsewhere. I also supported a number of items that I saw as being of upstream importance in getting to the beginning of problems and hopefully heading off some things down the road, and things like universal pre-K, early childhood mental health, bright beginnings, family intervention, youth prevention, and so on. I also put in an item which I think we might be able to do for only $100,000, because I think we could get a number of outside foundation support as well. But that's to do a truly comprehensive Health and Human Services planning process that would not only include county agencies, but also other agencies out in the community that we partner with. We've had strategic plans done or being done for children and adult services and senior services and homeless services and others, and appropriately so, but there's not been enough effort to really look at the big picture. And during our hearings, we had a lot of discussion about this, about all the possible overlaps in different agencies working in the same areas, and this might help us get a little better handle on that. Finally, I think a comment is in order in the one item that's conspicuous by its absence on my list, which is the Metro Hospital, and there's two reasons why I didn't recommend that we add to our subsidy. The first being that I know that they're going to come to us within the next couple years for assistance on a plan for a campus renovation, which is very much and totally needed, but I want to see how that's going to fit into this. And also, with the projection of an $18 million for operations next year, I think that their financial situation might be reasonably good. So I differed from some of my colleagues in that item, and it's just part of the process. Councilman Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having looked at this, and I haven't put down my thoughts yet, but I will, and hopefully in an academic way. The only place in the HHS that I feel comfortable is with Metro right now, and it seems that the number of 4 keeps coming up to bring them to from $36 to $40 million. And my basis for that would be because of the bang we're getting for our buck. And if we're getting that match, John, again, did we have to reapply? Did we get that? I think that alone is anytime we can get more money for the money we put in, it's obviously a good thing. And actually, within some of the concerns of those that have submitted their requests and the things that I've gone over, Common Police Court, we get money back for the assigned counsel fees. So I'm not there yet, and I've got a copy of all the assigned counsel fees in Cuyahoga County, and the scales of justice as far as dollars don't seem to balance for me right now properly, and maybe I need to be schooled a little bit more on that. And Ms. Simon, maybe you can help me out there. But I think that's an absolutely needed thing that we have to adjust. And I'm a little concerned at the timing of it. I'm wondering why they didn't come 2 years ago or a year ago, but we can talk about that also. I'm not anywhere yet with the Adams Board. I'm going to rely on Mr. Brady and his committee to give me guidance on the HHS side of things other than Metro, where I'm pretty comfortable with $4 million more for Metro because of the bang for our buck. Also, with some of the concerns in the courts, I went with Mr. Miller, I went over that and the domestic relations requests, the probate requests, and the request for the assigned counsel through Common Pleas. I really don't have a problem with, other than the first year in the assigned counsel. And I talked to the administrative judge and her finance individual. They will have a surplus at the end of the year, and I think we need to take some of that, take all of that and place that into, if we get to $3 million this year for assigned counsel, they're talking $600,000 to $800,000. That should stay in the court and should go there. And I'm still waiting for juvenile court to get back to me. And I keep hearing this throughout the court systems, that people are getting hired. We had an instance, evidently, somebody got fired in the county, and they were seen with a Common Pleas badge. I don't know how people get hired in the courts. That needs to be tightened down. I'm not comfortable giving people money that are just going to hire people. I've asked twice now, the judge that lost over in the juvenile court, his people evidently were sucked up into the general populace of the juvenile court. That has got to stop. I don't know how you justify that. And if anything has grown at just an incredible rate, in the study that I've done on the juvenile court is the juvenile court. We have bailiffs, we have assistant bailiffs, we have magistrate upon magistrate, magistrates have secretaries. I mean, I looked at the chart, it's a spider web. And I really need to know, and I don't know, maybe you can help me, Ms. Simon, because I'm not getting an answer from juvenile. Are the magistrates allowed to pick the attorneys on the assigned counsels? I thought that was just for the judges. I don't know if that's true or not.
I don't think that's true.
I hope not. But I need these questions answered. We've asked these, and we haven't received an answer yet. So I'm waiting on that. But I will submit what I think is proper and within boundaries. And on the HHS side, I'm going to rely on the HHS committee to help me out there.
Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, to Mr. Gallagher's point, this whole court, all those presentations from the court, I mean, when we had that morning, it was like kind of aggravating to me. In particular, we're with the employees under the executive, we're trying to have equity and fairness and so on. And so I agree with Mr. Gallagher. We got to get a handle that all county employees, whether they work for the court or for the executive or whatever, we should have some goals in mind of what we can do and what we can't do as far as benefits and so forth. I'm in full agreement with the full subsidy for Metro Health and what they asked for. a new day at Metro Health, and everything, all the feedback that I've gotten is very, very positive. And I think the explanation that Dr. Butkus gave us, made sense in that, it's going to be, the county's going to be having these monies coming back to us. As far as, I agree with Councilman Schron about, when we were out there, and of course everybody was out there promoting it on different angles, but it was always said that we had a deficit because of the housing crisis and the reduction of the property taxes. So restoring the program, the programs that were necessarily cut is, part of the money that, by raising the Health and Human Service amount, a certain amount was to restore what we had. Certainly, people didn't vote for an increase in the Health and Human Service levy to have reduction in service. At the same time, people, they that voted this voted to spend this money on health and human services. So, I am of the philosophy that we should be budgeting for that increase. Now, I'm not exactly sure where it, that's a moving target. But, the people put the faith in this council to assess funds, and they voted an increase. If all we did is restored what was cut by the reevaluation, I think we're going to have a very disappointed public, because they really didn't vote for that. I, for one, have been a big proponent of the mental health issues, because we know that treatment works. And the money spent on mental health, it's treating people, it's working. So in my mind, whatever we have available that we could steer to mental health, I'm all for. We know that the addiction problems, and in particular the heroin crisis, I know we can't solve this, and I think, I've said this before, this county can't make up for the cuts that the state have made, or the federal government, because we're just the county. But I really think that spending money with the Adams Board, there's some benefits beyond just treating people. I mean, with all the people that have got mental illness that are out there committing crimes that we're housing in our jail, and they're repeat offenders and so forth. So I don't have a dollar amount, but where I'd like to go is as much as we could put towards the Adams Board, I'd be in favor of. I agree wholeheartedly with Committee Chairman Miller's idea about getting a handle on this HHS, all those different departments. I mean, just coming in as a new councilman, I was just kind of overwhelmed. I don't know if you remember when we were going to these sessions where they were briefing about the new county government, and they had all these tables out there, and well, just go out and get some information from the tables. Well, it was children this, children that, children this, children. I was moving around, and it just seemed like every place I went was children. I'm not against children, but I just there is so much overlap that I just think we need to refigure this. And I think, like Councilman Miller said, this will be money well spent. And so I'm much in agreement about that. I see these numbers for the general fund and for the Health and Human Services levy. Until we know, and hopefully we're going to have a good idea after tomorrow, how much money we have, then I think I'd be more willing to commit to, specific dollars. But, and I guess one other thing I can say is that under the Senior and Adult Services, if we could, depending on what's available, there was some cuts to the Senior Resource Center that many of the communities use, and they could use some increased funding. I don't know what would be appropriate, but 25, 50,000, and I'll try to have a better figure of exactly, what exactly that would do and what that would restore. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Councilman Brady.
Thank you, Councilman Miller, Mr. Chairman. So much has been said that I don't want to, be too repetitious here as we get this far down the line. Obviously, people know, it's no secret that I'm very supportive of Metro Health and the Adams Board. I think that these documents, all three documents, have been a lot of food for thought. There are a lot of things here that I like. I don't see very much that I don't like. I think it's a good starting point. In some cases, I think there could be some adjustments. I don't like to pick and choose because it sort of seems to, not intentionally, but sort of pits some things against other things, and I don't want to sort of get into that kind of an idea, because if I say something, I like something a lot, it sort of implies that maybe I'm not as supportive of something else. I think that this is a good starting document. I am hesitant to support. I'm not saying no, but I'm hesitant to support a lot of the new programming that was suggested by the administration. I think that there needs to be a process for talking through these new programs and new initiatives, and I don't think that this budget process is that place. I think normally when a budget is announced, of course we understand what happened this year is very different. A budget is announced well in advance. If there are new initiatives, it's in the budget, discussion takes place. Because of the levy, that didn't occur, and so I don't think it would be appropriate to launch a lot of new initiatives without a process that's more thorough than one we have time for. But my ears are open. I'd be remiss, of course, if I didn't mention consumer affairs, but I actually believe, and on the basis of other discussions I've had, that it really was meant to be in the budget anyway. It just didn't get in there. We didn't set up a department not to have a department, and I think this is a pretty modest amount. We're not talking about paying people a whole lot of money to do some pretty important work. In terms of, I agree with Councilman. I agree with my colleague on the an additional look at money for senior centers. I think Mr. Germain is onto something that is important to me, and maybe we both share, particularly an aging community. I'm in support of the increase in assigned council fee structure, and we'll leave it to those who know better about these things than I do for guidance. So I think this is a good start, and we're well on our way. I want to commend the chairman for his diligence on all these issues, and the council president's proposal in particular, because it incorporates a lot of what a lot of people have been mentioning. I just want to say finally that I recognize Councilman Schron's point, and I not only respect that, but it is a fact that we many times, if not most of the time, discussed the property devaluation as the main reason, which it was, for us going to the ballot. I never believed that by saying we would have to cut programs, that we didn't mean that we were trying to meet the highest standards we could within our reasonable resources. And I think that then that's led me to initiate the discussion tomorrow, because I think we really sort of need to take a look at these other funds, particularly the Public Assistance Fund, to really understand what they are and how they got there, and not view them as sacrosanct, because we really, for the most part, don't know a whole lot about them. And a lot of this discussion started off early in the year with us being concerned that our staffing levels weren't high enough. And then we had quite a bit of discussion about where there was a very strong majority of people who had very strong concerns over continuing mental health issues. And I don't want to keep harping on this, but it just is a thing I'm living with now. And a couple of, and we're not going to be able to solve this with money, but it was within the last 3 days, there's been 2 heroin overdoses deaths in my own neighborhood. So I know that throwing money at that is not going to keep it from happening, but we have to have an approach to it that includes help for people, because it is epidemic and people are dying. So we're going to continue part of this discussion tomorrow afternoon, and again I want to welcome everybody who's got so much time on their hands to come and listen to that discussion while we try to reach an agreement between ourselves and with the administration that we can be proud of, but takes into the obvious consideration that there are limits to what we can do. And even though I'm strongly supportive of Metro Health and the Adams Board, I do agree that we want to know how money is being spent. Now, I know it's not our role to tell people how to spend money, but if we ask questions about how money is to be spent, and we're given answers, then we expect those answers to reflect how the money will be indeed be spent. And so I think we need more clarification from our friends at Metro Health and the Adams Board on how money, if appropriated, would be spent in a more precise way than has occurred up to this point. Thank you.
Mr. Miller, I'd just like to add one brief comment that I neglected to make when I had the floor before, and that is that myself and Mr. Brady have been in conversation with the executive, and once I just want to reiterate that this is a collaborative process between all of us, and that we have to share ideas between everyone, so everyone gets the ideas. So I just want to make sure that you get all your information to me also, so that we can continue discussions with the administration, and if you would reach out to us so that we can all work together on this process.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. Councilman Greenspan.
Great, thank you. Let me roll up my sleeves here. Page 1, Section 1, Item 1. Actually, my comments are more philosophical and will be brief. I'm going to be preparing my letter tomorrow, as I saw a lot of items coming in, but I think it's important, and I'll give you my overall philosophy on this. I think we have a tremendous opportunity right here, faced with some challenges, to kind of readdress the vision, the core values of our county and how we want to deliver those services. The Health and Human Service levy opportunity of the budget being reduced, assuming the levy didn't pass, with the opportunity now that it passed to address some of the issues and, once again, core values that we want to see focused on the county, gives us a unique perspective that we didn't have 2 years ago that we do have today. We obviously understand from there will be funds that are not in this current budget from the Health and Human Services, whether it's a full restoration, a partial restoration, which we agreed to some, or additional program appropriations. That's for us to debate. On the general fund, it's a little more challenging, and it's challenging in the sense that if you look out to 2016 and the reserve number that's left, assuming that this operational plan and everything that's spent, we understand the reserves on demand don't get spent exactly that way, but if it is, there's only about 1.5 million in unencumbered reserves above the 25%. So keep that in mind as we start looking for additional general fund appropriations, if that's the intent. And if that is the intent, and this is one of the concerns that I've had, is that as we have been progressing through these first 3 years, there have been projects that have been put in place which may now fundamentally hinder our ability to provide some of the core services that we talk about. And this is something we need to discuss. So I want us just to be aware of that as we move forward. The one issue that I'm still working on, and this is one of the reasons why I'm delayed in getting my response, and I was working with Mr. Corlett, and I'm working with the state of Ohio. This Medicaid tax number that Dr. Boutros mentioned, I'm trying to get a handle from the state, number one, what their projection is, and number two, when it comes, and if it comes down to the county, how we will be able to identify that number. We had a response that I'm not satisfied with, that we were unable to determine that amount. So I'm working through the state right now to see what that is, to be able to identify how much of that money, which we have been told is not and will not be included in the budget, in the revenue line, we can expect, and if so, would it be appropriate for us, once again, another core value decision, mission statement we would need to determine is, if that money is coming in from Medicaid, should that money then go to offset Medicaid-related services? So these are some of the items I'm looking at, but I think we're sitting in we have a tremendous opportunity in some areas and challenge in others in order to fulfill some of the requests I believe that we each would like to see by looking at the reports, but also from a consensus standpoint. The question we have to ask, especially in the general fund side, is how are we going to fund these initiatives? And it may require some additional discussions and challenges on the other side. So, thank you.
Okay, we have Councilman Brady and then Councilman Trot.
Very brief. I just wanted to respond to Councilman Greenspan. If I didn't make it clear, and I can't remember, we are going to have Mr. Corlett from Metro tomorrow as well to discuss the Medicaid waiver and the sales tax attached to that, and what we can know and what we can't know. We certainly know there's going to be some money, but we're going to have that's going to be part of the discussion as well tomorrow.
Councilman Tron.
And the comments that from some of the colleagues where we're going to get additional funds, I know that some of the questions that we brought up here as to how do we deliver these services, are there ways in which we can deliver them more efficiently? Is there a better way? I heard it from children, not to be negative, but to reiterate the fact that we had 3 people just a couple days ago stand at the podium and say, heroin, heroin, heroin. Then when asked the question, do any of you talk to each other about this subject matter? And the answer was no. The circles intertwine on a very minimal basis. And it just calls out from the taxpayer side, are we doing, not that we don't have our heart in the right place. The heart is the right place. The head is in the right place. It is, are we executing in the right method and manner? And actually, yesterday, I know that there was an announcement over at Cleveland State on the concepts of lean governmental services. And those of us in business have known about the concepts of lean and best practices and best improvements have come from the studies of human nature and how we do things and how we structure it. And one of the studies that they did down in the Columbus area, in the area of Health and Human Services, in the area of lean, ended off throwing off millions and millions of dollars in savings as a result of bringing in best practices. So I applaud the chairman of this to actually pick up on that idea that I think I mentioned to him, that we need to go forward. I am working with staff to actually start to put that together. I'd love to work with Mr. Brady, because this is a time when we as voters voted to change the structural core of our county to say that we can operate better by having a fiscal officer as opposed to a recorder and a treasurer and an auditor into a single type function. Is this not now time for us also to look at, can we function in the area of Health and Human Services in a structural way? We didn't ask the voters to vote for this piece. We asked them to vote for the charter. The charter was the precursor, I really believe, to some serious discussion using our best and brightest in the Health and Human Services, with our best and brightest from perhaps the business community, using our best and brightest from the needs side of it to function and actually say, is this the time? I don't underestimate the scope and the challenge that this will be. This is probably a couple-year project, but when you start to bring in the best of the IT piece to help deliver that, if we start to bring in the best of the human services and the needs, we heard it from Mr. Warren saying that he would rather see the monies that he has that were pre-cut down be used not in the administrative positions, but using the delivery of those services. Wouldn't that be the better place where we want to see this go? If we have a dollar that we want to put into any of these programs, isn't it in the delivery of those programs, not in the administration of those programs? So I think we are at that present time, and I would love to be part of bringing that forward. And that's really where I was a dog on a bone with the prosecutor's office and on the public defender's office saying you can't start putting payroll increases in until you've done the review process, know what the job descriptions are, and then you can measure performance. We are at that exact same place, I believe, in Health and Human Services. Everybody's heart is in the right place, and I just think we need to get the rest of our structure looked at. And this is a time where I would wholeheartedly encourage money being put into it, because I know there's matching funds that are going to be coming out of Columbus just to make this analysis, and the results have actually proven and shown that in the area of Health and Human Services, there is millions of dollars that can be saved as a result and then be applied to solve these needs out there. So just my last comment.
Thank you very much. I'd like
to the chairman, if I could make a point of clarification.
Yes. Okay.
Just very quickly. So I heard Councilman Germana reflect on the state cuts. I do want to just acknowledge that point and just recognize that we've been able to manage nearly $30 million in state cuts to our Health and Human Service levy revenue, and this is largely reimbursement of property taxes. And so I'm responding to your point in that our local dollars are being stretched farther, and it's an important point to understand. And lastly, to Councilman Brady, you reflected on 2 recent heroin overdoses. I spoke to Dr. Gilson yesterday, and what he shared with me is there are in fact 6 suspected heroin overdoses from last weekend. That's suspected. Now, we're still confirming this. And I share that because in front of you, we've maybe made an error to call all of these expansions new programs. In fact, in there is the Noxalone, and an expansion of that program. That was a one-time expenditure by the county to give families and individuals heroin, like overdose medication, a medication that a family can administer when someone's going into heroin overdose. And in fact, according to Dr. Gilson, that program has saved 10 or 15 to 20 lives in the past 2 years. Now, it's a small measure, and it probably is, more is needed. But But I want to just be clear that some of the programs that we've presented to you as new programs are, in fact, we're continuing one-time investments, and we're expanding existing efforts. And so thank you very much.
Okay, I'd like to just talk about the schedule going forward. We're going to meet next Tuesday, 2 hours before the council meeting from 3 to 5, and then we're going to meet again the following Tuesday on December 3rd. We have the Invest in Children program in the morning, so we're going to start at 11 o'clock, go for a couple hours, break at 1 o'clock, and then go from 2 to 5 if needed. And then we need to pass a budget out of this committee and get it to the council. I strongly want to get the budget out on time on December 10th. I'm willing to pass it under second reading suspension, which in the ideal world you wouldn't do, but the world is never ideal. We're going to have to find ways to vote on things in packages. If we debate each item one by one and vote on, there's just no way in God's earth there's time to do that. So we're going to have to work on the process, and so that's where we are. And Ms. Simon,
I'll just, when we come back, we'll talk about it. Just time to go.
Anything else? Anyone signed in for public comment?
No, Mr. Chair.
Motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.